what if I told you that the only way to really understand the artificial intelligence currently operating on your phone or, mapping biological proteins and threatening to totally upend the global economy is to look at the bloodiest, most devastating global conflict in human history?
Yeah, I mean, it's a premise that instantly makes people uncomfortable, and it honestly should.
Right.
When we look at the sources for today's deep dive, we really have to establish a rigid boundary before we go any further.
Okay, let's unpack this.
So we are analyzing the mechanics of a historical era, specifically the Second World War, but we are absolutely not, equating a geopolitical catastrophe that killed tens of millions of people with modern workers losing their jobs to algorithms.
Yeah, blurring that line is just intellectually dishonest.
Exactly. And it's deeply disrespectful to the victims of that war. War is a tragedy of blood. Artificial intelligence is, well, it's a disruption of labor and capital.
I really appreciate setting that boundary right away. If you're listening to this, please hold on to that distinction. Our mission today is not to compare human suffering.
Right, not at all.
We are diving into these sources because they highlight a structural parallel that is just completely unprecedented. I mean, we're looking at the sheer terrifying speed of invention.
Yes.
We're examining what happens when the entire global economy is retooled overnight. And we're unpacking the societal warning lights that start flashing when massive economic displacement collides with just hyper-accelerated technology.
So to understand the baseline of that disruption, we have to look at the math, right? The math of massive global mobilization.
Let's hear it.
The sources provide this sort of financial X-ray of the Second World War. They estimate the total global cost at roughly $1 trillion in contemporary currency.
Which, if we adjust for inflation, sits at around $14 trillion today.
Exactly.
And the United States alone spent the modern equivalent of $4 trillion.
It's almost hard to wrap your head around that number.
It is. To put that $14 trillion into perspective for you, if you're trying to conceptualize a number that large, that is the equivalent of buying every single publicly traded company in Europe twice over.
Wow.
Yeah, and doing it in the span of less than 5 years.
Right. And that capital injection didn't just stimulate the economy. It violently terraformed it.
Terraformed it, yeah.
This was the largest single economic mobilization in human history. Nations were taking these massive established industries like automotive manufacturing in Detroit, for example.
Right, building cars one day.
Exactly. They were completely gutting their assembly lines on a Friday and demanding they produce complex aerodynamic bombers by the following Monday.
That's just wild.
They were building synthetic rubber industries and mass manufacturing supply chains literally out of thin air. It fundamentally altered the very definition of human productivity.
And that physical retooling of the planet, that's the exact framework the sources use to bridge us to the modern AI landscape.
Right.
Now, obviously, we haven't spent $14 trillion on server farms yet, but the metric of disruption isn't just about capital.
No, it's about the blast radius.
Exactly. The sources point to a major 2023 financial estimate projecting that 300 million full-time jobs worldwide could be exposed to AI automation.
But the term exposed in these financial models, well, it carries a very specific weight that is often misconstrued as a body count for careers.
I actually want to push back on how that word is weaponized in the media because I feel like it creates unnecessary panic.
It does.
Exposure does not mean eradication. I mean, think of the invention of the standardized shipping container in the 1950s.
Oh, that's a great example.
Right. The entire global supply chain was suddenly exposed to this metal box, but it didn't destroy the need to move goods.
No, global trade actually skyrocketed.
Exactly. But it did completely erase the physical role of the traditional longshoremen, the guys carrying sacks of coffee on their backs.
Replaced by crane operators and logistics software.
Right. So exposure simply means the physical or cognitive interaction with your daily tasks is going to be fundamentally altered.
That is a highly accurate analogy, because if you're sitting at a desk right now analyzing legal documents or, say, writing marketing copy, you are standing in the exact same historical footprint as a factory worker in 1941.
That's a sobering thought.
Your industry is facing a systemic weather event. The tasks you perform intersect directly with the capabilities of this new technology. So the shape of your labor will change, even if the end goal, moving the cargo or delivering the legal brief, remains the exact same.
Okay, so If the human toll isn't the point of the comparison, but rather the sheer scale of the labor disruption, we have to look at what actually birthed that disruption.
Right.
The sources map out a technological explosion during the war that effectively built the modern world. I mean, we were talking about radar, the jet engine, the first electronic computers like Colossus and Ionias.
Mass-produced penicillin.
Yes. Synthetic rubber, nuclear power. The sheer volume of invention is staggering.
We can actually look at the development of the magnetron to understand the sheer velocity of this innovation.
Okay, lay that out for us.
So before the war, radar was largely a crude, pretty cumbersome concept.
Right.
The British needed a way to detect incoming bombers through the fog and clouds of the English Channel, and they didn't have decades to refine the physics.
Because they were literally being bombed.
Exactly. So they developed the cavity magnetron. It's essentially a copper block with precisely machined holes that forces electrons to swirl in a magnetic field, emitting high-power microwaves.
Okay.
By bouncing these microwaves off distant objects and timing their return, they could see through the weather.
So they took a theoretical physics concept and basically weaponized it to win the Battle of Britain in a matter of months.
Yeah.
And they even gave us the microwave oven in the process, since that same magnetron technology is, what heats up your leftovers today.
Exactly. The spin-off technologies were massive.
The sources argue this was necessity dragging invention into existence at gunpoint.
And the underlying challenge radar solved was pattern recognition in an incredibly noisy environment.
How so?
Well, think about it. How do you distinguish a squadron of metal airplanes from a dense cloud bank using only radio waves?
Oh, I see.
You are looking for a specific signal amidst an ocean of noise.
Which is the perfect bridge to the modern AI breakthroughs, right?
Right.
Because finding the signal in the noise is the exact mathematical problem solved by deep learning neural networks today.
Precisely.
And the sources highlight the 2017 transformer architecture as the bedrock of this modern explosion.
Right. And to understand why the transformer changed everything, we have to look at how machines process data before it.
Walk us through that.
Earlier AI models read text sequentially, word by word, much like a human does.
Left or right?
Yeah, exactly. But they would often forget the beginning of a paragraph by the time they reached the end.
Ah, so they lacked a long-term memory.
Yes, but the transformer introduced a mechanism called self-attention.
Self-attention.
Okay. It allows the algorithm to look at an entire sequence of data simultaneously. It mathematically weighs the relationships and context of every single word against every other word, regardless of how far apart they are in the text.
So it understands that the word bank means something completely different if the word river is in the same sentence compared to the word money.
Exactly. It grasps the context instantly.
And because it processes everything all at once, you can throw massive planetary scale data sets at it.
You can. And the downstream applications of that foundational architecture are staggering.
The sources point to deep learning systems currently reading medical scans with, higher accuracy rates for certain anomalies than human radiologists.
Yeah, but the most profound leap mentioned in the material is AlphaFold.
Oh, man. Solving a 50-year-old biological mystery. Protein folding.
Right. So biology is basically driven by proteins, which start as linear chains of amino acids.
Okay.
To function, they have to fold themselves into incredibly complex, three-dimensional origami shapes. The shape dictates the function. It acts like a physical key fitting into a biological lock.
So if it folds wrong, it doesn't work.
Exactly. And for half a century, predicting exactly how a specific chain would fold was considered one of the grand challenges of science.
Why was this so hard?
Because the number of possible configurations for a single protein is greater than the number of atoms in the observable universe.
Wait, really? The entire observable universe?
Yes. It's a computationally impossible problem if you try to do it by brute force.
Right, so AlphaFold didn't sit there and try to simulate the literal physics of every atom to figure it out, which would take millennia.
No, they didn't.
It used the same underlying philosophy of pattern recognition we see in transformers. It looked at the known structures of proteins and learned to predict the unknown ones.
And by doing that, it mapped nearly all known proteins on Earth.
It's just wild.
It provided a vertical leap in human capability. And that same underlying technology was utilized in platforms to design the mRNA vaccines.
Turning what used to be a decade-long process of viral cultivation into, essentially, a software design problem.
Which allowed a global pandemic response in under a year.
So both eras feature about 5 years of hyper-compressed, just frantic invention. We have Radar and penicillin on one side and transformers and protein folding on the other.
Yeah, the timeline compression is very similar.
But here's the thing. The engines driving these two eras are entirely different.
Completely different.
During the war, governments poured unlimited money into these problems because the alternative was literal annihilation. The engine was an existential emergency.
Right, whereas today, the engine is corporate funding.
Yeah.
We are seeing hundreds of billions of dollars injected into the tech sector, driven by a race for market dominance and, the potential for unimaginable profit margins.
I do have to challenge this binary, though. The sources argue that today's AI development lacks an existential threat. But, if we are rapidly handing over the administration of our energy grids, our global financial markets, and our information distribution networks to black box algorithms that even their creators don't fully understand.
Right, the alignment problem.
Yeah. Isn't that an existential threat? The threat hasn't vanished. It just shifted from a foreign army dropping bombs to our own digital infrastructure potentially collapsing.
That is a really vital distinction to make, but it's a distinction between the threat of the product and the driver of the creation.
Okay, explain that.
You are absolutely correct that the deployment of AI carries massive systemic risks.
Right.
But the engineers currently writing the code for the next iteration of a large language model, they are not doing so because they fear their families will be subjugated by a hostile power if they fail.
Fair point.
They are doing it for equity packages, venture capital funding, and corporate prestige. The underlying motivation dictates the guardrails.
Ah, I see what you mean.
When survival is the motivator, society rallies together and accepts rationing, blackouts, and total upheaval.
Yeah.
But when profit is the motivator, the technology is developed in private silos, it's fiercely guarded, and then unleashed onto a public that is just trying to go about its daily life.
That makes a lot of sense. And the sources call this a historical anomaly. We are developing world-altering tools at wartime speed, but without wartime stakes.
It creates a really surreal cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
You can drive to the grocery store, pick up milk, and return home to read that an algorithm just revolutionized material science or broke standard encryption.
It's just wild.
We're living through the equivalent of the Manhattan Project happening on a random Tuesday, while civilian life pretends everything is totally normal.
And that nuance proves two opposing extreme viewpoints completely wrong, doesn't it?
It really does.
You have the doomsayers claiming AI is an apocalyptic sci-fi movie about to end the world.
Right.
And on the other hand, you have the skeptics claiming it's just a financial bubble that will pop and fade.
Both are missing the mark.
The reality is much more complex. It's a permanent leap in capability driven by aggressive capitalism, operating in a vacuum of immediate physical danger.
Yes.
But if the stakes aren't a literal war, how does this actually impact the individual? Because that's what you, listening right now, probably care most about.
We have to zoom in from the macroeconomic scale to the micro level. We have to look at what massive economic shifts actually do to human psychology.
The sources ground this theory with a deeply personal narrative, and it's about an older Romanian technician.
This story really stuck with me.
Same here. This is a man who had survived as a slave laborer in Germany during the Second World War. He experienced the absolute darkest depths of human machinery.
Where people were treated as expendable resources until they died.
Exactly. And decades later, speaking to a younger colleague, he made a statement that just stops you in your tracks.
What did he say?
He said, Terry, there is no difference between communism and capitalism. In a communist country, if you don't do what they tell you, they shoot you and you're dead. In a capitalist country, if you don't do what they tell you, they send you broke and you might as well be dead.
From a purely academic standpoint, equating a totalitarian regime that executes dissidents with a capitalist system that allows bankruptcy seems, well, absurd.
It sounds like hyperbole.
But we must analyze this from the vantage point of the worker at the very bottom of the economic hierarchy.
Right.
To a person who has been entirely stripped of agency, the specific mechanism of their ruin becomes irrelevant.
If you are shot, your life ends.
Yes.
But if you lose your job, your savings, your health care, and your home, and there is no social safety net to catch you, your ability to participate in society ends. You basically become a ghost in your own life.
Exactly. To the victim facing starvation or exposure to the elements, the distinction between state-sanctioned violence and economic abandonment is a luxury they cannot afford.
That profound sense of helplessness transforms a labor market disruption into a literal existential crisis for the individual.
It really does.
So those 300 million jobs exposed to automation, They are not just variables in an economic formula.
No, they represent human beings. Human beings whose identities, social standing, and physical survival are inextricably linked to their ability to sell their labor.
Think about it. If you are sitting in traffic commuting to a job that you know an algorithm could do in 3 seconds, that anxiety isn't just about finding a new career path.
No, it's a primal fear of being discarded.
When a worker is displaced at that speed without a robust system to transition them, it triggers the exact same fight-or-flight survival instincts as a physical threat.
And when we zoom back out to the societal level, we have to ask what happens when millions of individuals experience that exact same existential dread simultaneously.
Which brings us to the tipping point. The sources completely dismantle the cartoonish idea of why historical conflicts actually start.
Right, we tend to view war as a product of collective anger or ideological zealotry.
That people are just mad and want to fight.
But human beings are intimately aware of their own capacity for violence, and because of that, they inherently fear it.
War is universally understood by the common person as a horrific, destructive force.
Exactly. The average worker does not pick up a weapon and risk their life simply because they are angry at a politician or frustrated by some abstract policy.
So what drives them?
Violence on a mass scale is the resort of the hopeless.
The historical triggers for societal rupture are laid out with brutal clarity in the text. Societies tear themselves apart when the basic biological mechanics of survival are stripped away from a critical mass of the population.
It happens when parents cannot secure employment no matter how hard they work.
It happens when families face mass evictions.
Yes. The sources pinpoint the ultimate catalyst for violence, the death of one's children, or the sheer inability to keep them safe and healthy.
That's chilling.
When an economic system fundamentally locks a parent out of the ability to provide sustenance and medical care for their family, the social contract dissolves entirely.
I mean, why would a person obey the laws of a society that has actively condemned them to starvation?
Exactly. They won't.
And this is the warning light flashing on the dashboard of the AI revolution. The text refers to this potential future as the Slop-Pocalypse.
Which is such a vivid term.
It is, but it isn't a sci-fi scenario where data centers become sentient and launch missiles like in the movies.
The real danger is a mass erasure of purpose and economic security for the global working class.
And it's happening faster than any government can draft legislation to manage it.
We are building an immense societal pressure cooker.
Yeah.
If rapid economic displacement leaves a massive swath of the population desperate and stripped of their ability to survive, history is entirely unambiguous about the result.
They will fight back.
They will. A society cannot maintain order when a significant percentage of its citizens feel they have absolutely nothing left to lose.
Which forces us to look at the true measure of a society. How do we absorb this blow? We've walked through the staggering math of wartime mobilization.
The structural parallel is undeniably there.
We've looked at the mechanical leaps from magnetrons to transformers, and the terrifying reality of what happens when workers view economic ruin as a death sentence.
Right. And the ultimate lesson of these sources isn't about the technology itself.
No.
The comparison to the Second World War was a framework to understand the release of violent pressure. The war was the explosion.
Okay, I follow you.
The defining challenge of our current era is whether global institutions can absorb the immense pressure of hyper-accelerated technological change without detonating.
The text distills this into a single, powerful mandate. People must be the point, not the collateral.
I love that phrasing. We already know humanity is capable of engineering miracles.
Clearly.
We know we can map the building blocks of biology and create neural networks that process language with eerie sophistication. But the true measure of our civilization moving forward will not be the speed of our processors or the valuation of our tech companies.
It will be the strength of our social safety nets.
Precisely. It comes down to transition.
If a society develops miraculous tools but treats the displaced workforce as acceptable casualties of progress, if it fails to provide retraining, economic safety, and a bridge to whatever the new economy looks like.
It will shatter.
Yeah.
The responsibility lies in recognizing that technological advancement without social protection is a recipe for historical disaster.
We must ensure the citizens are carried through the transition rather than crushed underneath it.
That's the only way forward.
We started today by looking at a seemingly radical comparison between a global war and artificial intelligence code.
It seemed crazy at first.
It did. But by tracing the physical realities of the inventions, from radar cutting through the fog to transformers cutting through data and contrasting the engines of survival against corporate funding, we see the blueprint of our current reality.
It's all there in the history.
We are moving at wartime speed, without the wartime stakes to bind us together. And that's leaving the individual worker to face an existential crisis entirely alone.
Which leaves us with a critical, potentially defining question for the next decade.
Lay it on us.
If history demonstrates that necessity forces invention, and right now corporate funding is forcing that invention without a unifying existential threat,
Right.
what happens if the resulting mass economic displacement and the severe societal unrest it breeds becomes the new existential threat we have to invent our way out of?
Wow. If the economic fallout of the tool becomes the very crisis that forces humanity into a corner, we will have built our own emergency.
We will have.
The technology isn't just a clean, linear climb up a mountain. It's a massive disruption demanding an equally massive evolution in how we value human life and labor.
Exactly.
So, as you go about your week, keep questioning the systems being built around you, look closely at who is managing the transition, and we'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.